welcome. My name is Stefanie Linhardt, Europe editor at The Banker, and I'm here with Andrew Wilkinson, partner at the European restructuring team at Weil, Gotshal Manges. Andrew, you've been working on the restructuring of the Ukraine sovereign debt. This has all been triggered by the IMF bailout, $40 billion last year, and that had this trigger in it that we also needed a 15 billion debt part being agreed on by the bondholders. Now, you've been working for the bondholders. Tell us, what were the main difficulties in that deal?
Yeah, that's right, Stephanie. I think the principal issue with the deal, and you're right, the IMF laid down the parameters of the deal, and Ukraine had to deliver a debt restructuring within those parameters. And the IMF had a very strong view that Ukraine would recover provided there was a debt reduction. And the principal issue in the restructuring was that issue of the debt reduction. It was very common in restructuring. The bondholders were taking the position that an extension would be enough, a reduction was premature, and Ukraine should make progress in implementing reforms before a reduction was put on the table. The IMF and Ukraine would not accept that. And the resolution, the breaking of that deadlock was the delivery to the bondholders of what we call in the restructuring the upside instrument, which enabled the bondholders to accept a reduction and swap it for an economic interest in Ukraine's recovery.
Now, you mentioned the upside instrument. Tell us a bit about the structure of this actual agreement.
Well, the upside instrument was the critical part of the deal. Without the upside instrument, there would have been no debt write-down, and the bondholder group thought about it as the closest you could get to equity in a country. I mean, one of the peculiarities of sovereign debt restructuring is that the currency you often deliver in a corporate restructuring to creditors, namely equity or ownership of the company. I mean, you just can't do that with a country, but you can give creditors an interest in the growth of the economy, growth in GDP over the future years. And Ukraine was prepared to do that and offer the bondholders a share in the growth and the recovery over the IMF base case through to 2041, long period of time. And the bondholders saw that as valuable. And then the key to the deal, because there have been one or two upside instruments in previous sovereign debt deals, which have not been successful. Mm-hmm. One was used in Argentina, one was being used in Greece. And for Ukraine, it was central that the bondholders got value through the upside instrument. So the structuring of the upside instrument became incredibly important. The upside instrument is linked to the exchange debt. There were protections built in to give the bondholders some proper protections, covenants, protection against repudiation, possibly by Ukraine, of the obligations under the upside instrument. And the protections and the economics combined to form an instrument which had not really been seen before in sovereign debt deals, and delivered what Ukraine wanted. In return for writing off 20% of their claims, the bondholders got the upside instrument, which the capital markets have seen as valuable.
What sort of impact does this restructuring now have on Ukraine, for one, but also on the bondholders?
Look, I think that for the bondholders, the deal was a good deal. The markets reacted very positively once the deal was announced. And for Ukraine now has its destiny in its own hands. The IMF targets have been met. Ukraine should have a sustainable debt to GDP level following the debt write-down. And Ukraine has the opportunity to implement its reforms. I mean, there are clearly significant challenges ahead, but with the backing of the IMF and the world's capital markets, Ukraine will hopefully turn around its economy, implement reforms, and be a success story for sovereign debt restructuring.
Now, there's one little bit that's still sort of missing. So we've still also got the Russian bond, which is obviously not really part of what you've been working on, because you've been working on the bondholder group. But the Russian bond is also part of this $15 billion that are meant to be part of the IMF restructuring, IMF bailout restructuring plan. Now, Russia hasn't agreed yet. What is the impact of this, and how are we going through this?
Well, look, restructurings, always have hold-out issues, and that can cause problems. I mean, the Argentine hold-out issues ended up redefaulting Argentina and defaulting the previously agreed debt restructuring. And one of the critical jobs in structuring the Ukrainian debt exchange was to ensure that were the Russian government to hold out, and they hold a bond which on its terms is exactly the same as all of the other bonds, that if Russia elected not to come into the exchange would still proceed, and the new bondholders, the exchange bondholders, would be protected from the consequences of default under the Russian bond. So that's what we did. I mean, we have structured the exchange to withstand a default on the Russian bond. And there's no real dispute that the Russian bond has defaulted. They are due their $3 billion at the end of December. But the exchange bonds are ring-fenced from the consequences of that default. And although I'm sure there will be settlement negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, which may well produce an agreement in the fullness of time, the critical thing is that the exchange bonds will not be prejudiced. Payments cannot be attacked were Russia to litigate against Ukraine. I mean, it would be interesting. There are lots of law professors dying to see the Russian government bring their claim against Ukraine in the courts. But so far as the debt restructuring is concerned, legally, it's really a bit of a sideshow. I mean, the exchange has closed, and the new bonds we don't think can be prejudiced by Russia pursuing its claims against Ukraine.
Andrew Wilkinson, partner at Weil, thank you very much.
Thanks, Stefanie.